My name is Sophie, and I need to tell you about the day my life fell apart completely. It was a Tuesday in October, and I was 48 years old. I'd been married to Marcus for 23 years, and I thought I knew everything about him. How wrong I was. It started that morning when I was looking for our council tax bill. Marcus worked at the warehouse and had already left for his early shift, so I went into our bedroom to check his bedside drawer. We lived in a council flat in Croydon, nothing fancy, but it was ours. I'd been cleaning offices for 15 years to help pay the bills, and our son Jake, 19, worked part-time at the local Tesco whilst studying. I opened Marcus's drawer looking for that bill, but instead I found something that made my blood run cold. Hidden underneath some old papers was a bank statement I'd never seen before. Our joint account, but showing transactions I knew nothing about. Money being transferred out regularly, £50 here, £100 there, always to someone called A. Whitmore. My hands were shaking as I dug deeper. There were letters, written in a woman's handwriting. Love letters. My darling Marcus, one began, "Thank you for the money this month. I can't wait until we can be together properly." Another one was even worse. "When you get rid of Sophie like we planned, we can finally start our real life together." I sat on our bed, staring at these letters, feeling sick. 23 years of marriage, and he'd been planning to throw me away like rubbish. The woman, Amanda, had been thanking him for money that should have been buying our food, paying our bills. Money I'd worked for, cleaning toilets in office buildings. I heard Jake getting ready for college in the next room, so I quickly took photos of everything with my phone and put it all back exactly as I'd found it. I couldn't let Jake see me falling apart. I went to work that day like nothing had happened, but inside I was dying. I'd planned to wait until the weekend to confront Marcus quietly, when Jake was out with his mates. I needed time to think, to plan what I was going to say. But when I got home from my cleaning job that evening, I knew something was wrong immediately. Marcus was sitting in our front room with Jake beside him. Both of them looked tense, and Marcus had that look in his eyes, the one he got when he was about to lose his temper. I'd seen it before, but never directed at me like this. "Hello, love," I said carefully, putting my bag down. "Everything all right?" Marcus stood up slowly. His face was cold, harder than I'd ever seen it. "Sophie," he said, "you've got 40 minutes to pack your things and get out." I stared at him. For a moment, I couldn't process what he'd said. "What? Marcus, what are you talking about?" That's when he exploded. "I don't love you, our son doesn't love you, nobody in this family loves you anymore. Leave. Now." I looked at Jake, desperate for him to say something, anything. But he just stared at the floor, his face red with shame. "Marcus, please," I started, "what's brought this on? We can talk about whatever's wrong. 40 minutes, he repeated, and then he grabbed my old mobile phone from the side table. "And if you don't go right now, I'll smash this thing so you can't ring anyone for help." I felt the world spinning around me. This was my husband of 23 years, the father of my child, threatening to destroy my phone like some kind of thug. Jake still wouldn't look at me. I wanted to scream at him about Amanda, about the money, about those horrible letters. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way Marcus was holding my phone like a weapon, or maybe it was seeing Jake so uncomfortable. I realized that Marcus didn't know I'd found his secrets that morning. And suddenly, I understood that this knowledge, this evidence, might be my only weapon. "Right," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll pack a bag." As I went upstairs, my legs were shaking so badly I could barely climb the steps. Behind me, I heard Marcus on the phone. "Yes, she's going now. Everything's working out just like we discussed." I packed one small suitcase with trembling hands, my mind racing. 23 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. With threats and lies and a 40-minute deadline. But as I zipped up that case, something inside me hardened. Marcus thought he was so clever, getting rid of me before I could discover his affair. What he didn't know was that I already had the evidence that could destroy him. I was going to use it. I spent that first night on my sister Carol's sofa in Mitcham, staring at the ceiling and wondering how my life had collapsed so quickly. Carol had to leave early for her job at the care home, so I was alone with my thoughts and those terrible photos on my phone. I couldn't stop looking at them. The bank statements showing money disappearing from our account month after month. The love letters from Amanda, written in neat handwriting that looked nothing like mine. But it was one particular letter that kept drawing my eyes back to it, the one that made my stomach churn every time I read it. My darling Marcus, it said, I know this is hard for both of us, but we're nearly there. Once you get rid of Sophie like we planned, we can finally be together properly. Thank you for the money this month, it's helped so much with the flat deposit. I can't wait to start our real life together. All my love, Amanda XXX. Get rid of Sophie like we planned. Those words kept echoing in my head. This wasn't some spontaneous affair that had got out of hand. This was calculated. Planned. They'd been discussing how to destroy my life, probably for months. I thought back to that morning when I'd found everything. I'd only been looking for our council tax bill because the reminder notice had come through the door. Marcus usually dealt with all the paperwork, but he'd been so distracted lately that bills were piling up. I'd gone to his bedside drawer thinking I'd just grab the council tax letter and get it sorted myself. Instead, I'd found evidence that my entire marriage was a lie. The bank statements showed that Marcus had been taking money from our joint account, money we desperately needed for food and bills. I did the sums in my head as I sat there on Carol's sofa. Over the past 6 months, he transferred nearly £1,000 to this Amanda woman. £1,000 that should have been keeping our family afloat. But it was the letters that really broke my heart. There were 5 of them, all written in the same careful handwriting. Amanda thanking Marcus for money. Amanda talking about their future together. Amanda discussing when would be the best time to make the move. And then there was the worst one of all, dated just 2 weeks ago. Marcus, darling, I know you're worried about Jake, but he's old enough to understand. Once we explain that Sophie has been making everyone miserable, he'll see that this is for the best. You can't keep living a lie forever. I love you so much, and I can't wait for us to be a proper couple. The flat in Wimbledon is perfect, much nicer than where you are now. Jake can visit whenever he wants. They'd even been discussing my son. Planning how to turn him against me. How to make him think that his mother was the problem, that she was the one making everyone miserable. I remembered Jake's face from the night before, how he couldn't look at me when Marcus was shouting. How uncomfortable he'd seemed. Had Marcus already started poisoning him against me? Had he been telling Jake lies about his own mother? The phone rang, making me jump. For a moment, I hoped it might be Jake, calling to apologize, to say he didn't mean it. But it was Marcus. Sophie, his voice was cold, businesslike. Just so you know, I'll be telling people that you've had some sort of breakdown. That you needed time away to get yourself sorted out. A breakdown? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Well, you have been acting strangely lately, haven't you? Getting suspicious, going through my things. People will understand that the stress has got to you. My blood ran cold. He was already rewriting history, making me out to be the unstable one. Marcus, I haven't dash. I think it's best if you don't contact Jake for a while, he continued, talking over me. Let him settle down after the shock of last night. You turning up at his work or college would just upset him more. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, realizing that Marcus was systematically cutting me off from everyone I loved. First my home, now my son. But what Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that I had evidence of everything. Every lie he'd told, every pound he'd stolen, every plan he'd made with his precious Amanda. I looked down at my phone, at those photos I'd taken. Marcus thought he was so clever, getting rid of me before I could find out about his affair. What he didn't realize was that I'd already found out everything. And I was going to make him pay for every single lie. 5 days had passed since Marcus threw me out, and I was trying to establish some sort of routine. Carol had been kind enough to let me stay, but I could see the strain on her face. She was a single mum herself, working double shifts at the care home, and having her older sister sleeping on the sofa wasn't exactly ideal. I'd managed to keep going to my cleaning jobs, though it was hard to concentrate. The ladies at the office building where I worked Tuesday mornings had noticed something was wrong. Mrs. Henderson from the accounting firm on the 3rd floor had asked if I was feeling all right, and I'd nearly broken down right there in the corridor. But I couldn't tell anyone the truth yet. Not until I'd worked out exactly what I was going to do with those photographs on my phone. I was just finishing the toilets on the second floor when my mobile rang. The display showed Marcus's name, and for a split second, my heart leaped. Maybe he'd come to his senses. Maybe he wanted to talk properly, to sort this mess out. I should have known better. Why haven't you paid the council tax? His voice was sharp, angry. No hello, no asking how I was managing. Just straight into the attack. I stood there in the office toilet, holding my rubber gloves and looking at myself in the mirror. 5 days of sleeping on Carol's sofa had taken its toll. I looked exhausted, older than my 48 years. Marcus, you threw me out of the house, I said quietly. How exactly am I supposed to pay council tax for somewhere I'm not allowed to live? That's your problem, isn't it? His tone was so cold it made me shiver. Your name's on the tenancy agreement too. You can't just stop paying because we've had a row. A row. That's what he was calling it. Not a betrayal, not a calculated plan to destroy my life, just a row. The council's sent a red notice, he continued. If it's not paid by Friday, they'll start proceedings. Do you want that on your credit record? I felt that familiar fear creeping into my stomach, the fear that maybe he was right, maybe this was all my fault somehow. After 23 years of marriage, Marcus had become very good at making me doubt myself. Even now, standing in an office toilet with cleaning supplies in my hands, part of me was wondering if I should just find a way to pay the bill and keep the peace. But then I remembered those letters. Amanda's neat handwriting. When you get rid of Sophie like we planned. No, Marcus, I heard myself saying. I'm not paying council tax for your love nest with Amanda. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. I could practically hear his brain working, trying to figure out how I knew that name. How did you? He started, then stopped himself. How did I what, Marcus? How did I find out about your girlfriend? About the money you've been stealing from our account to pay for her flat? You've been going through my things. His voice was different now, panicked rather than angry. I found your little love letters, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I know everything, Marcus. About the money, about your plans to get rid of me, about how you've been lying to Jake. Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice was low and threatening in a way I'd never heard before. Sophie, you need to be very careful here. You don't know what you're dealing with. Oh, I think I know exactly what I'm dealing with, I shot back. A lying, cheating husband who's been planning to abandon his wife of 23 years. If you think you can use this to cause trouble, you're very much mistaken. No one will believe you. Won't they? I've got photographs, Marcus. Of everything. The line went quiet again, but I could hear him breathing heavily. You have no idea what you've just done, he said finally. I know exactly what I've done, I replied. I've stopped being your victim. He hung up without another word. I stood there in that toilet, staring at my phone, my hands shaking like leaves. I'd just declared war on a man who had clearly been planning this betrayal for months. A man who had turned my own son against me, who had stolen our money to set up a new life with another woman. But for the first time since he'd thrown me out, I didn't feel powerless. I felt angry. And anger, I was beginning to realize, was much more useful than fear. I put my phone back in my pocket and picked up my cleaning supplies. I had work to finish, and then I had some serious planning to do. Marcus thought he'd been so clever, getting rid of me before I could find out about Amanda. What he didn't realize was that I'd found out everything, and I wasn't going quietly. The next morning, I sat in the waiting room of Croydon Citizens Advice Bureau, clutching my phone like it contained the crown jewels. Because in a way, it did. Those photographs were the only proof I had that my 23-year marriage hadn't ended because I was mental or difficult, as Marcus was no doubt telling everyone. The waiting room was full of people who looked as lost as I felt. A young mum with a baby, an elderly man with a walking stick, a woman about my age who kept checking her watch anxiously. All of us needing help with problems we couldn't solve on our own. Sophie Williams, a kind-looking Asian woman in her 50s, appeared at the door. I'm Mrs. Patel. Would you like to come through? Her office was small but tidy, with filing cabinets along one wall and a desk covered in neat piles of papers. She offered me tea, which I accepted gratefully. I hadn't been eating or drinking properly since Marcus threw me out. "Now then," she said, settling behind her desk with a notebook. "How can I help you today?" I'd practiced what I was going to say, but when it came to actually speaking the words out loud, I found myself struggling. "My husband, he threw me out of our flat. He said he doesn't love me anymore, and now he wants me to keep paying the bills for a place I'm not allowed to live." Mrs. Patel nodded encouragingly. "That must have been very distressing. How long have you been married?" 23 years. "We've got a son, Jake, he's 19. My voice cracked slightly. "Marcus has turned him against me too." "I see. And you mentioned bills. What sort of bills?" I took a deep breath. "Council tax mainly. But Mrs. Patel, there's more to this than just marriage problems." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. "I found evidence that he's been stealing money from our joint account. He's been having an affair, and they've been planning to get rid of me for months." Mrs. Patel leaned forward with interest as I showed her the photographs. Her expression grew more serious as she read Amanda's letters, and when she saw the bank statements, she whistled quietly. "Sophie, this isn't just about relationship breakdown," she said carefully. "What your husband has done with your joint account, taking money without your knowledge or consent, that's financial abuse. It may even be theft." Hearing her say those words, financial abuse, theft, made something click into place in my mind. I wasn't going mad. This wasn't my fault. Marcus was the one who had broken the law. "What can I do?" I asked. "Well, firstly, he cannot legally exclude you from your joint tenancy. Both your names are on the council agreement, which means you have every right to be there. He certainly can't make you pay bills for a property you're not allowed to access." She made some notes on her pad. "I'm going to give you the number for a solicitor who specializes in family law and domestic abuse cases. She works with people on low incomes, so don't worry about the cost for an initial consultation." Just as she was writing down the details, there was a soft knock on the door. Mrs. Patel looked up, frowning slightly. "I'm sorry," her colleague said, peering round the door, "but there's a young man here asking for Sophie Williams. Says he's her son." My heart jumped. "Jake?" Mrs. Patel looked at me questioningly. "Would you like him to come in?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. A moment later, Jake appeared in the doorway, looking absolutely terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed, his usually neat hair was a mess, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Mum," he said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "Can we talk?" Mrs. Patel discreetly stepped out to give us privacy. Jake slumped into the chair beside me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "I'm so sorry, Mum," he said finally. "Dad told me. He said you'd been stealing money from the account. He said you wanted to leave us and take half of everything. He made me promise not to contact you." I felt my heart breaking all over again. "Jake, love, I would never dash." "I know," he interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. "I know you wouldn't. I've been thinking about it all week, and none of it made sense. You've worked so hard for our family. You'd never steal from us." I showed him the photographs on my phone, watching his face change as he realized the truth. His expression went from confusion to shock to anger. "Bloody hell, Mum," he whispered. "He's been lying to everyone." "What's he been telling people?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Jake's face flushed with shame. "He's been telling the neighbors that you've had some sort of breakdown. He brought this woman, Amanda, round to the flat twice this week. He introduced her as a friend who's helping him through a difficult time." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not only was Marcus stealing our money to fund his new life, he was already parading his mistress around our neighborhood. "Mum," Jake continued, "some of his mates at work have been asking me if you're all right. They think Dad's being too harsh. They remember when you used to bring him lunch on Fridays, how happy you seemed together." I squeezed Jake's hand. At least some people remembered who I really was. Mrs. Patel returned with fresh tea and a sympathetic smile. She handed me a business card. "This is Sarah Mitchell, the solicitor I mentioned. I've taken the liberty of calling her, and she can see you tomorrow afternoon if that suits. I looked at the card, then at Jake's concerned face, then back at Mrs. Patel's kind eyes. For the first time since Marcus had thrown me out, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. Yes, I said firmly. That suits perfectly. Jake and I decided we needed to see Amanda for ourselves. It sounds mad now, but at the time, it felt like the only way to understand what we were really dealing with. Was she some sort of master manipulator who had seduced my husband away from his family? Or was she just another victim of Marcus's lies? We waited outside his warehouse on Friday evening, parked in Carol's old Fiesta where we could see the gates. I felt like a private detective from a television program, except this was my real life falling apart, not some drama for entertainment. Marcus came out at 5:30 with a couple of his workmates. He looked relaxed, laughing at something one of them had said. It made my stomach turn, seeing him so carefree whilst I was sleeping on my sister's sofa and fighting for my basic rights. We followed him at a distance as he drove through South London. I was surprised when he turned into a tree-lined street near Wimbledon Common, definitely not the sort of area we could ever afford. The houses were Victorian terraces that must have cost a fortune, with neat front gardens and expensive cars parked outside. Marcus stopped outside a conversion that had been split into flats. We parked further down the street and watched as he walked up to the front door of the ground floor flat. He had his own key. Through the large front window, we could see into a sitting room that was nothing like our council flat. Everything looked new and expensive: cream leather sofa, glass coffee table, artwork on the walls. And there she was. Amanda was about 35, blonde, quite pretty in a conventional way. She was wearing a smart work dress and heels, the sort of clothes I couldn't afford on my cleaning wages. But as we watched, I noticed something that surprised me. She didn't look particularly happy to see Marcus. "Look at her face, Mum," Jake whispered beside me. He was right. When Marcus tried to kiss her hello, she turned her head away. When he sat down next to her on the sofa, she moved to the armchair. She kept checking her mobile phone and seemed distracted, nervous even. We watched them for about 20 minutes. Their body language was all wrong for a couple deeply in love. Amanda barely looked at Marcus when he was talking, and at one point, she actually got up and walked out of the room whilst he was still speaking. "She doesn't look like she's having the time of her life, does she?" Jake observed. On the way back to Carol's, Jake told me more about what had been happening at home. "Dad's been bragging to his mates at work about starting a new life," he said. "But the weird thing is, none of them seem impressed. Dave, you remember Dave who used to come round for Sunday lunch sometimes? He pulled me aside yesterday and said Dad was being out of order. He said you were always good to everyone, always made people feel welcome." That nearly made me cry again. Dave had been coming to our Sunday lunches for 3 years after his wife died. I'd always made sure he had plenty to eat and sent him home with leftovers. "What else has your father been saying?" I asked. Jake looked uncomfortable. "He told me you'd been acting strange for months. Said you'd been checking up on him, going through his things, getting jealous and paranoid for no reason." He paused. "But Mum, you weren't acting strange, were you? You were just starting to notice things." "I suppose I was starting to suspect something wasn't right," I admitted. "Your father had been different, secretive, always on his phone, coming home late. I thought maybe he was just stressed about work. He's been telling Amanda that you and him separated ages ago," Jake continued. "I heard him on the phone last night. He was reassuring her about something, saying you'd agreed to the divorce and that you'd moved out voluntarily because you wanted a fresh start too." The lies just kept coming. Marcus had constructed an entire fantasy where I was the one who wanted to end our marriage, where I was the one who had chosen to leave. It was breathtakingly dishonest. But what struck me most was Amanda's behavior. She hadn't looked like a woman celebrating her victory over a rival. She'd looked worried, uncomfortable, maybe even guilty. "I think," I said to Jake as we pulled up outside Carol's maisonette, "that Amanda might not know the whole truth about what your father's been doing." "What do you mean?" "I mean she might not realize that he threw me out with 40 minutes notice. She might not know about the threats, or the money he's been stealing. She might think this really was an amicable separation between two people who'd grown apart." Jake looked thoughtful. So what are you going to do? I stared up at Carol's lighted window, thinking about my sister working double shifts to support herself and her own problems, whilst I imposed on her kindness because my husband had decided to destroy my life. I'm going to talk to her, I said. Woman to woman. I waited outside Amanda's building the next morning at 7:30, when I figured she'd be leaving for work. My heart was pounding, and I kept rehearsing what I was going to say. Part of me felt ridiculous, a 48-year-old cleaning lady confronting her husband's mistress outside an expensive flat in Wimbledon. But I needed to know the truth about what Marcus had told her. At 7:45, the front door opened, and there she was. Amanda looked even more polished in daylight, neat blonde bob, designer handbag, smart coat that probably cost more than I earned in a month. She was checking her phone as she walked towards a silver Audi parked on the street. Excuse me, I called out, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. You're Amanda, aren't you? She looked up, startled. Yes, do I know you? I'm Sophie. Marcus's wife. The color drained from Amanda's face so quickly I thought she might faint. She stopped dead in her tracks, her keys frozen halfway to her car door. His wife, she repeated quietly. But he told me you were divorced already. Did he? I kept my voice calm, non-threatening. When exactly did he tell you that? Amanda looked around nervously, as if she expected Marcus to appear from behind a tree. We've been seeing each other for about 4 months. He said the divorce came through in the summer. He said you'd both agreed it was for the best. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken. These are the love letters you wrote to him, Amanda. The ones I found hidden in our bedroom. The bedroom we still shared until he threw me out with 40 minutes notice last week. Amanda stared at the screen, her face going even paler. She sat down heavily on a low wall that ran along the front of her building. Threw you out, she whispered. 40 minutes to pack a bag and leave. He threatened to smash my phone if I didn't go quickly enough. I sat down beside her, keeping my distance but close enough to speak quietly. He told me our son doesn't love me, that nobody loves me. Then 5 days later, he rang demanding to know why I hadn't paid the council tax for a flat I'm not allowed to live in. Amanda's hands were shaking as she stared at my phone. He told me you'd left him years ago. He said you'd taken half his money and disappeared. He said he was struggling to pay for everything on his own. Is that why you've been giving him money? She nodded miserably. He said he was behind on his rent, that he might get evicted. I felt so sorry for him. She looked at me with wide eyes. I've lent him nearly £3,000 over the past few months. £3,000. I thought about all the times I'd worried about our grocery bill, all the times I'd walked to work instead of taking the bus to save money, whilst Marcus was taking cash from this woman to fund God knows what. Amanda, I said gently, how much do you know about Marcus's real situation? He said he lived in a small rented flat in Croydon. He said it was all he could afford after the divorce settlement. She was starting to cry now, mascara making dark tracks down her cheeks. He said you'd been difficult about money, that you'd taken everything you could. I showed her the bank statements. This is our joint account. See these transfers to your name? That's our grocery money, our bill money. Money I earned cleaning offices, being taken without my knowledge to pay for your flat deposit. Amanda covered her face with her hands. Oh God, what have I done? I thought he was just a lonely divorced man trying to start over. I felt sorry for her then, despite everything. She wasn't some scheming mistress who had set out to destroy a marriage. She was just another victim of Marcus's lies, another woman he was using to get what he wanted. He's very convincing, I said quietly. He had me fooled for 23 years. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us trying to process the extent of Marcus's deception. What are you going to do? Amanda asked finally. I'm going to fight for what's mine. My home, my son, my dignity. I've got a solicitor now, and I'm going to use every piece of evidence I can get. Amanda wiped her eyes with a tissue. I feel so stupid. So used. Join the club, I said with a bitter laugh. She looked at me with something that might have been respect. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone bitter, Angry, vindictive. The way Marcus described you, he made you sound like you were mentally unstable, violent even. I stood up, straightening my coat. I am angry, Amanda. But not at you. You've been lied to just like I have. Will you need me to give evidence or something? Probably. Are you prepared to do that? She nodded slowly. I can't let him get away with this. What he's done to you, to your son, it's horrible. As I walked away, I heard her calling Marcus's number behind me. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her tone was sharp, furious. By the time I got back to Carol's, I felt something I hadn't felt for weeks. Hope. The next few days were like watching dominoes fall, one after another. Amanda had confronted Marcus the same morning I spoke to her, and according to Jake, who was still living at the flat, the phone calls between them had been spectacular. Dad was shouting down the phone at her yesterday evening, Jake told me when he came round to Carol's. I heard him saying she'd got it all wrong, that you'd twisted things to make him look bad. But she wasn't having any of it. Amanda had been true to her word. She'd gathered every text message Marcus had sent her, every receipt for money she'd given him, every lie he'd told her about his situation. She'd even recorded one of their phone conversations when he tried to convince her that I was making everything up. She's dropped him completely, Jake reported with obvious satisfaction. She told him she never wanted to see him again, and she wants her £3,000 back. Meanwhile, Sarah Mitchell, the solicitor Mrs. Patel had recommended, had been building our case systematically. Sarah was about my age, with greying hair and a no-nonsense manner that I found reassuring. What your husband has done, she explained during our second meeting, constitutes financial abuse under the Domestic Abuse Act. Taking money from joint accounts without the knowledge or consent of the other party is considered economic control. She'd helped me compile everything. The bank statements showing the unauthorized transfers, Amanda's written statement about the lies Marcus had told her, the threatening text messages he'd sent me, and Jake's testimony about how Marcus had tried to turn him against me. The community response had surprised me. Carol had spread the word carefully among our neighbors, and people I'd known for years were coming forward with their own stories about Marcus's recent behavior. Mrs. Chen from the flat next door had noticed Amanda coming and going at odd hours. I thought it was strange, she told Sarah in her statement. Marcus told me his wife had gone to stay with relatives for her health, but this young woman was obviously living there some of the time. Even Dave, Marcus's workmate, had agreed to provide a character reference for me. Sophie was always decent to everyone, he said. She'd have you round for Sunday lunch and send you home with enough food for the week. Marcus has been telling people she went mental, but that's not the woman I knew. The housing officer from the council had confirmed that Marcus couldn't legally exclude me from our joint tenancy. Both parties have equal rights to the property, she explained. He cannot change the locks or deny access without a court order, which he certainly doesn't have. But it was Jake's evidence that really sealed our case. He'd started recording conversations with his father, catching Marcus making threats about what would happen if I tried to cause trouble. If your mother thinks she can embarrass me with lies about Amanda, she'll find out how difficult I can make her life, Marcus had said in one recording. I'll make sure everyone knows what sort of woman she really is. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus, who had built his entire campaign against me on lies, was now accusing me of planning to embarrass him with lies. 3 weeks after our first meeting, Sarah called with news. We've got a court date, she said. Next Friday morning, Croydon Family Court. The judge will hear our application for your return to the matrimonial home and for interim financial support. That evening, Marcus sent me a text that made my blood run cold. You're making a big mistake, Sophie. Drop this nonsense or you'll regret it. I showed it to Jake, whose face darkened with anger. He's scared, Jake said firmly. Really scared. And he should be. Carol poured us both tea and sat down at her kitchen table. What happens if you win next Friday? I get to go home, I said simply. I get my life back. But even as I said it, I wondered if going back to that flat would feel like home anymore. So much had changed in the past month. I'd discovered strengths I didn't know I had, and I'd learned that I could survive on my own. Whatever happened in court, I wasn't the same frightened woman who had packed a bag in 40 minutes and left without a fight. I was someone who fought back. Friday morning arrived grey and drizzly, which seemed fitting for what felt like the most important day of my life. I met Sarah Mitchell outside Croydon Family Court at 9 o'clock, my stomach churning with nerves. "Remember," Sarah said as we climbed the steps, "we have all the evidence we need. Just answer the questions honestly and calmly." Jake, Carol, and Mrs. Patel had come to support me, sitting in the public gallery like my own personal cheerleading squad. Their presence gave me strength I didn't know I needed. Marcus arrived 10 minutes later with a duty solicitor, a harried-looking young man who kept shuffling through papers. Marcus looked confident, almost smug, as if he still believed he could talk his way out of this mess. That confidence began to crumble the moment Sarah started presenting our evidence. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s called District Judge Harrison, examined the bank statements with growing disapproval. When Sarah read out excerpts from Amanda's letters, Marcus's face went pale. "Mr. Williams," Judge Harrison said, "can you explain these unauthorized withdrawals from your joint account?" Marcus's solicitor stood up. "My client maintains that he was entitled to access marital funds for legitimate expenses." Legitimate expenses? The judge raised an eyebrow. Such as funding accommodation for his extramarital relationship. That's when Marcus made his first mistake. Instead of letting his solicitor handle things, he jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, my wife has been mentally unstable for months. She was becoming increasingly paranoid and difficult to live with. I was trying to protect my son from her erratic behavior." "Is that so?" Judge Harrison looked unimpressed. "And threatening to destroy her mobile phone, was that also for your son's protection?" Sarah played the recording Jake had made of Marcus threatening to make my life difficult. The judge's expression grew even stonier as she listened to Marcus's voice, cold and menacing, promising consequences if I continued with my lies. Then came Amanda's written statement, detailing every lie Marcus had told her about our marriage being over, about me taking his money, about me being mentally unstable. "Your Honor," Marcus's solicitor tried desperately, "these recordings were made without my client's knowledge. In his own home, by his own son, who was concerned about threats being made against his mother." Judge Harrison cut him off sharply. The final blow came when Sarah presented the testimony from our neighbors and Marcus's own workmates. Person after person describing me as kind, hardworking, and stable, whilst expressing confusion about Marcus's sudden claims that I was difficult and unstable. "Mr. Williams," Judge Harrison said, her voice cutting through the courtroom, "your behavior has been both dishonest and financially abusive. You have systematically undermined your wife's reputation with lies whilst conducting an extramarital affair funded by money stolen from your joint account." Marcus was sweating now, all his earlier confidence evaporated. Furthermore, the judge continued, "Your attempt to exclude your wife from the matrimonial home whilst demanding she continue to pay council tax demonstrates a level of manipulation that this court finds deeply disturbing." Marcus tried one last desperate lie. "Your Honor, if I allow her back, I fear for my safety. She's been making threats. The only threats I see evidence of, Mr. Williams, are the ones you've been making." Judge Harrison's voice was ice cold. "Mrs. Williams, you are hereby granted immediate access to your home. Mr. Williams, you will provide your wife with keys and full access to the property within 24 hours. She wasn't finished. Additionally, Mr. Williams, you will repay the sum of £1,000 to the joint account within 30 days, representing the money you took without authorization. You will also pay interim spousal support of £200 per month until this matter is resolved permanently." As we filed out of the courtroom, Marcus caught my arm. "This isn't over, Sophie," he hissed quietly. "Yes, Marcus," I replied calmly, "it is." For the first time in 23 years of marriage, I wasn't afraid of him. I was going home. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my kitchen table, the same table where Marcus used to hide his bank statements, where I found those letters that changed everything. But the flat feels completely different now. It's mine. Marcus moved out permanently after the court hearing. He couldn't bear living somewhere that constantly reminded him of his humiliation. He's renting a bedsit in Thornton Heath now, and from what Jake tells me, the relationship with Amanda never recovered. Apparently, She started seeing a teacher from her local school, someone who doesn't lie about his circumstances. Jake lives with me while he saves money from his Tesco job. He's applied for teacher training, inspired, he says, by watching me stand up for myself. I never knew you were that strong, Mum, he told me recently. I don't think you knew it either. He's right. 6 months ago, I was a woman who cleaned other people's offices and let her husband make all the decisions. Now I've got a promotion to supervisor, and the head teacher at one of the schools where I work has suggested I apply for a teaching assistant course. The money Marcus was ordered to repay helped me redecorate. I painted over the magnolia walls with cheerful yellow, hung pictures I chose myself, and bought a small sofa from the charity shop. It's not much, but it's exactly what I wanted. The strangest thing is how little I think about Marcus now. For 23 years, he was the center of my world, the person I organized my entire life around. Now he's just someone I used to know, someone who taught me what I won't accept from people who claim to love me. I've joined a walking group for women over 40. We meet every Saturday morning and explore different parts of South London. Last week, we walked across Wimbledon Common, right past the street where Amanda used to live. I felt nothing except gratitude that I'd found the strength to fight back. Dave, Marcus's old workmate, still comes round for Sunday lunch sometimes. He brings flowers occasionally and helps Jake with odd jobs around the flat. Last Sunday, he asked if I'd like to go to the cinema with him next week. I said yes, but I made it clear we're taking things slowly. I'm not the woman who needs a man to feel complete anymore. The walking group leader, a woman called Patricia who divorced her husband after 30 years, told us something that stuck with me. You can't control what people do to you, but you can control what you do about it. Marcus thought he could discard me like an old piece of furniture he'd grown tired of. He thought I'd disappear quietly, perhaps even gratefully, leaving him free to start his new life without consequences. What he didn't count on was discovering that I had a voice. And once I started using it, I found I quite liked the sound. This evening, I'm making dinner for Jake and myself, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad and listening to Radio 4. Later, I'll work on an assignment for my teaching assistant course. Tomorrow, I'll clean offices with the same pride I've always taken in honest work, except now I also know I'm capable of much more. The flat is quiet except for the sound of Jake's television in his room and the occasional car passing outside. It's a peaceful quiet, not the tense silence that used to fill this place when Marcus was planning his betrayal. I look around my small kitchen, at the yellow walls and the cheap but cheerful curtains, at the homework spread across the table, and I smile. Marcus tried to destroy my life, but instead he set me free. And I wouldn't change a thing.